on the second slide now. I'll keep moving through.
Yeah, I see it. Great. Just to let you know what's going to happen, the faculty are going to give a brief introduction and an overview. They'll introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the group and the kind of work we do. There'll be a Q&A time with the faculty, and then we have breakout rooms. I will post the link to the breakout rooms in the chat. It's on the wiki page that is also in your email. And will be a time to talk with grad students, so you can ask them all sorts of juicy questions about the faculty and what it's like working with them, or anything else that you would like. And that's it. It's back to Aaron.
All right, thanks, Molly. And thanks, Molly, for doing a lot of the work to help us organize this and get the word out. This was really a collective effort. What is the Community Data Science Collective? Those of you who have found yourselves here have probably found some information to answer this question already. But the short version is that we're an interdisciplinary research group that works across multiple campuses. I didn't introduce myself yet, but I'm Aaron Shaw. I'm an associate professor at Northwestern University. And we have graduate students and faculty. I think represented here today, we have 4 or 5, depending on how you want to count Shaimindu Dasgupta, institutions. So you'll hear more from the faculty members and have a chance to talk with the PhD students. But we do a bunch of different kinds of work in the group. And the slide lists a few of these kinds of work. We mostly study online communities, mostly focusing on various aspects of participation, organization, and learning within those environments. Members of our group mostly, but not entirely or exclusively, use quantitative and computational methods to do this work. And we mostly do work that the outsiders would label as something like social science, social computing, or HCI, human-computer interaction research, or learning sciences research. So here's the list of the current faculty affiliate members of the group. And I should add that all of the faculty members of the group are here today. And we've provided links to the graduate programs that we are all affiliated with. So if you want to download the slides, or we will post a link to these if they're not there already on the event page on our wiki. You can learn more about any of us individually, and we really encourage you to get in touch with any of us who you might be interested in working with in particular. But the idea here is to underscore that we're in different places and we're affiliated with different PhD programs, sometimes multiple PhD programs within the same university. To just pick on myself as an example, I'm affiliated with 2 different PhD programs at Northwestern. They have overlaps. I'm not the only thing that overlaps about them, but they're distinct. And you might, if you're considering applying, you might learn about both, but one or the other is usually a better fit for most people. And I'm happy to try to answer questions about that with you over email or something later. I don't think we want to do sort of an extended introduction right now, but we'll give folks a chance. Most of the faculty are going to have a chance to talk a little bit about some of the research that they're doing. There's one person who's not going to do that, partly because she's at an institution that doesn't recruit graduate students. So Sneha, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly now while we're on this slide?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sneha Narayan. I'm an assistant professor of computer science at Carleton College. I collaborate with the Community Data Science Collective, and I actually, as a PhD student, was also involved with this research group. I'm now at a primarily undergraduate institution called Carleton College, so I'm not recruiting PhD students, but I'm still available to answer any questions, particularly questions around applying to graduate schools as an international student.
Thanks so much, Sneha. The other thing I should say that's really great about having both Sneha and others here today is that a lot of them have worked as graduate students in the group. Even the folks who are now postdocs and several faculty members in the group have been around long enough that they can give you a sense of what it's been like to be in the group over time and work with some of the other faculty members over time. So they're really, really valuable sources of information too. So in some ways, and here I'll move on to the next slide, one of the best ways to illustrate what the group does and who's here and what we're about is to talk a little bit about some of the kinds of research that are happening in the group. And what we're going to do with the remaining with most of the remaining time for the faculty chunk of this is just give you very quick, like kind of 1-minute postcards of some recent studies. And each of these studies shares some characteristics. They all involve collaborations between faculty and graduate student members of the group. Several of them involve collaborations across institutional lines within the group. And they all involve a different faculty member among those of us who are recruiting graduate students. So it'll give each of us a chance to say a little more about some of the work that we've been involved in. That said, it's a very incomplete list, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. So, but for now, I'm going to pass it off to Mako to talk about the first project here.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm Mako Hill. Benjamin Mako Hill. I go by my middle name, Mako, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington. My primary appointment is in the Department of Communication, but I advise students in the departments of Human-Centered Design and Engineering, Computer Science and Engineering, and the Information School. All right. So on to the postcard. So imagine if we could line up every piece of software in terms of how important it was. And imagine if we could also sort of like line them up in terms of how responsive to bugs the creator of those pieces of software were, the communities that were maintaining them. And then we could like kind of plot it, put it on a graph. Wouldn't it be really nice if everything sort of fell along this nice line where the most important stuff was the stuff which was best maintained, and the stuff which was maybe less well maintained was the most neglected, was the least important stuff? Well, because free software and open source software is typically produced by the kinds of online communities that our group studies, participants, generally speaking, get to choose what they work on. And unfortunately, they don't have to and often don't choose to work on the stuff that is most important. So Kaylee Champion, who's here and who's a UW PhD student in communication, calls this phenomena underproduction. And her dissertation work is really focused on understanding it in the context of online communities like free and open source software and also like Wikipedia. So in the paper on this postcard, Kaylee wrote a whole bunch of custom software to do data mining on more than 22,000 pieces of software from the Debian GNU Linux project, and developed a bunch of computational models to try to identify and measure underproduction. And Kaylee and I were able to identify more than 4,000 packages that were underproduced in Debian, and to name names. That's sort of what's up on the slide. This is the most underproduced packages, and has presented this work to a range of folks in the software industry who are interested in things like risk and security in software infrastructure or software supply chains. And in current and ongoing work, Kaylee's trying to model the social and communicative dynamics that lead to underproduction. What causes it? So that we can not only identify the most risky pieces of software that are about to, before they blow up in our faces, but also understand what causes them to become that way. What are the social processes that lead to that? Okay, so I think with that, I'll pass it off to Jeremy.
Hi, everyone. Great to have you here. I am Jeremy Foote. I'm an assistant professor at Purdue University in the Brian Lamb School of Communication. I am one of those that Aaron talked about. I am a graduate from this group. I graduated from Northwestern. Happy to chat about what that was like. Obviously, it was a good enough experience that I'm still here and still happy to be participating with the group. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about this project led by Sohyun Hwang at Northwestern University. We looked at why people participate in small online communities. Like, we might think there's lots of reasons that an online community would get better as it gets bigger. Economists call this network effects, that there are more people, there's more information, more opportunities to kind of get the thing that you want from a community as it gets bigger. But if we look at communities, this graph on the left shows a bunch of communities that survived from 2018 to 2020. These are subreddits. And if it survived that long, we stratified by the size it was in April 2018. And as you can see, they basically all stayed about the same size. That the communities don't change in size very much. And so there's this huge number of small communities that stay small. And so we asked, why do people participate in those if we think that the benefits increase as the size increases? So Sohyun interviewed 20 people that participate in these small subreddits, and found, we thought we would find, I mean, I thought at least, that what we would find is that people participate in the small subreddits because they could form relationships, that they knew everyone in the subreddit, that they knew their names and about their dog and their pet, and that they form these relationships. We did not find that at all. In fact, it was very rare that people knew anything about the other people. Rather that this was a way to maintain control of sort of what kind of information that they received, to partition the information space, and to understand sort of the kind of people that they would be participating in. So Hyun presented this work at the recent CSCW conference, the Computer Supported Cooperative Work Conference, and won an honorable mention award for it. And this is an example of sort of some of the non-quantitative approaches, and we have a number of sort of interview-based studies and qualitative approaches that we've taken as well in the group. I'll pass it off to you. I think Shaimindu is next. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, so I'm Shaimindu Dasgupta. I am currently an assistant professor at the School of Information and Library Science at UNC Chapel Hill, but next year I'm moving back to the University of Washington to join the Department of Human-Centered Design and Engineering. Like Aaron mentioned, I was a member of the Community Data Science Collective. Before I was a faculty, I was a postdoc, and I also worked closely with them as a graduate student as well, though I did my PhD at MIT. A lot of my collaborations happened with the folks at CDSC. So I'm happy to answer questions about postdoc life or PhD student collaborations and so on as well. So the paper that I want to quickly describe was led by Regina Cheng, who I see is here. So you can also follow up with her as well. And I think the broad question that we were trying to answer in the paper is, how do people learn from each other's projects and discussion in an online community? What role does interests or passions play in this process? And Regina conducted a mixed method study using both qualitative and quantitative methods to look at how children in the Scratch Online community learn about variables and lists when they're learning how to program. And she started off by analyzing discussions in the online community forums in the Scratch Online community. And based on this qualitative work, she developed a theory that suggests that learners who share an increasingly dominant interest, such as, say, making games — a lot of people like to make games with Scratch — are best served in an interest-driven online learning community, and this sort of pattern tends to self-perpetuate over time. Once she had this theory, she ended up testing this theory using quantitative methods across a large number of community members and the projects that they have shared, and she found support for this idea. And this is sort of surprising because it seems from what Regina found that online communities become better at supporting learners over time, but they do so by becoming increasingly almost bad at supporting anything that is not a dominant interest. So if you're not super interested in games, you may not find as much support about learning about a certain computational concepts as someone who is interested in games. And this has important lessons for us in terms of how we design and run online communities that are supposed to support learning. And with that, I will hand over the slides to Aaron.
Yep, they're back to me. All right, so I introduced myself briefly already. I'm involved with a few different kinds of research in the group, and the study that I'm going to talk briefly about is a piece of survey-based research, which encompasses sort of one area of my work. So this was a study that looks at, that's part of a series that analyzes online participation inequalities. So inequalities in who participates where, doing what on the internet. And the studies include Wikipedia, gig economy sites, and a bunch of other areas of the social web. This particular one was led by Flor Fears, who's a PhD student member of the group at Northwestern in the Media Technology and Society program, and Flor's here today. And it was published earlier this year at the Journal of Quantitative Description Digital Media. And in the paper, we examined the relationship between contributions to a few different kinds of online information resources. And we look at that in relation to a kind of experimental measure of just overall generosity. The generosity measure is sort of is called the dictator game, which is it's an old school thing from experimental social psychology and economics research. And what it does is it basically asks how much it says to the person participating in the study, we're giving you $10. You can decide to share some portion of it with somebody else in the study. It's entirely up to you how much you choose to share. And so we asked this of all the people in this survey, and we also asked them in a separate set of questions, what kinds of content participation they engage in various parts of the internet. And what you can see on the slide here is a table where what we did is we compared the kind of contribution rates for those who in the dictator game, for those who participate in certain kinds of online activities versus those who don't. And in general, we find that people who contribute any kind of content online also tend to donate more in a dictator game than those who don't. And we found some interesting differences across specific kinds of activities online. You can look up the paper, it's open access, available at the URL that's linked on the slide. And as I said, we'll circulate these. And you can read more about what we have to say about the implications of that. But for here, I'm just going to emphasize that the sort of broad agenda here that this is a part of is understanding who does what online, why, and with what consequences, right? And that's a big area of inquiry. And I really encourage you to talk more with Flor or others in the group to sort of understand how that plays out in the work of the collective. So just to close up this part of it, I want to underscore a couple things. One is that this was a wildly incomplete and non-representative sample in a lot of ways of the work that's happened in the group. And there are a lot more people and there are a lot more projects. And we've posted some links here in the slide that we can point you to, but they were also linked to in the announcements for this event, our various tweets and emails that went out. And we're happy to resend those if you want to send any of us a message, with just links to our group wiki, which includes a page where you can look at all the different people who are in the group and a list of our recent publications, as well as our research blog, which we do a pretty good job of posting sort of short summaries with links and images and things, pulling together any of the recent publications that come out across the group. And Molly is helpfully posting a bunch of links in the chat, so that's great too. And I really encourage you to take a look there to learn more. The last thing I wanted to mention about this that I hope you can take away from this is that if you came to this session really thinking about one university or one faculty member, I hope that this has given you a sense of the range of different kinds of work that happen in the group. And just to underscore that we really do all work together and talk together a lot. So, just looking at the list of people who responded in the RSVP form, a lot of you indicated interest in applying to Northwestern. I'd really encourage you, as the faculty member who's at Northwestern, I love that people are excited to apply to Northwestern and come to work with me. I'm flattered. I think that's fantastic. I really encourage you to seriously consider applying to work with the other members of the group as well. If you're interested in the kind of work that I do, there is 100% chance that you're interested in the work that these other folks do as well, right? And I think that goes for any of us. So I really, really can't underscore that enough. And I want to just draw attention to that before we shift gears into more of the Q&A part. So with that, I think we're ready for to talk about some of the questions that folks submitted ahead of time. And I wanted to encourage people again to write questions in the chat. Also, some current student members of the group put together what they call the not so obvious frequently asked questions page, which the link is in the slides right now. Maybe that's another one someone can add to the chat. But I really encourage you to take a look at that too. The current PhD student members of the group are the best resource for extensive information and a detailed understanding of what it's actually like to be a student member of the group, for obvious reasons, I think. So, learning what from what they've written down, talking to them in the breakout rooms in just a few minutes, I think is really a great way to enrich your understanding as well. So, okay, folks submitted questions ahead of time. Molly, I don't know, how did we plan to do the next part? Were you going to pull out a few of these for us to try to take as a group?
Sorry, moving between windows, always complicated. What do faculty look for in students?
Some faculty member want to respond there? No. I can try. We actually we have a PhD recruiting blog post that we all wrote that that tries to summarize this. The short answer is that there's no short answer. There's yeah, thanks, Nick. That's right. We're very comfortable with letting questions linger in the air. No, we look for that. No, I think what we look for are really people who are genuinely curious and eager to learn about the kinds of domains of research that we feel like we have something to offer in terms of insight and mentoring around. And we want to understand what you're bringing, right? Like why you, why us, why now? I think there are any range of experiences, qualities, qualifications that people might have, and we don't have like a checklist that we go through, or there's not like a minimum GRE score or anything like that. I think it's much more holistic and much more focused on understanding sort of like where an applicant is at and how effectively we feel we can support the work that they want to do, and where that fits into the different priorities that we as individual faculty members have, and sort of the commitments that we have as a group. So I don't know if anyone else wants to respond.
Sure. I would say that the main thing that I'm looking for is that I'm interested in I want to hear what kinds of questions you're interested in, and I want to and I'm thinking does that resonate to me? Is that an interesting thing? Is that a thing that I want to spend the next 4 to 5 years talking to you about? Right? Not that we will necessarily be talking about that one particular thing, but is this the kind of question that is interesting? It's okay. It's if you don't, a lot of people are like, well, I don't have a lot of computational skills yet. It's fine to, part of being in graduate school is it's the school part of graduate school. You learn stuff in the process, right? I think that that Aaron's right. There's a range of kinds of things, but I think that a real interest in the kinds of questions about sort of online communities and sort of the big questions that we've sort of hinted on in the little talks here. I think that that's really the main thing that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add to that by also saying that I think it was already mentioned that one of the things that at least I get asked a lot since I develop new tools and systems is that, do I need to be an expert programmer to apply to your PhD program or to apply to work with you? And the answer is no. I think I am interested in people with different types of skills and interests because I feel that, having a group where people are complementing each other's interests and approaches is a great thing to have. And sometimes you have to like pick up new things as you go along in a PhD program. But it's not necessarily true that like we are always looking for like people with a lot of technical skills. You might have to like pick some up as you go along, but you know, like you don't need to like be an expert in, you know, like I don't know, like JavaScript and React or R to just like at the very beginning.
Cool. We have a question that people are already answering in the chat, but maybe we want to talk about it. It's from Honglin Bao about how you advise students, how you co-author papers, how do you work together across disciplines?
I think that I mean, I guess I can say that I think that there are sort of lab models out there where there is sort of like the principal investigator who has the big idea, and students are generally hired to like essentially like execute on that vision. You're like a worker that's carrying something out. I would say that like that's not the model in this group. And I think I can say that about all the faculty. I think that that generally speaking, almost I mean, it's not unrepresentative to the fact that all four of the pieces that we showed here were led by graduate students in the group. I think basically almost every piece of work is led by graduate students in the work, and there's very little work that is led by faculty that is, you know, that in which graduate students are playing only a supporting role. I think it's normal in the beginning of the project for, and actually like throughout the people's PhD projects to help out, for students to help out on projects that involve, for example, like a range of other kinds of students in more supporting roles. But I think that even those projects tend to be led by students. I think that the model of work here is that we are a lab, we get together, we share work on our projects, we give each other feedback on things all the time. We act as a community, not just within our universities, but really across. We have meetings like this, except without all of you. It's but otherwise very much like this, where we present work and you know, share feedback and ask questions and do these sorts of things. And we do retreats a couple times a year. But I think the vast majority of the sort of the intellectual sort of work and the research work within the group is graduate student led at really every stage of the process.
So it's time to split into breakout rooms. You can stay in here to talk with faculty, though it is highly, highly recommended. Sorry, my keyboard is so loud. That's very common around here, though not a requirement. You can go talk to like current students and some former students about their experiences. There's now a link again in the chat that lists the breakout rooms and who will be in them. So stay here, go talk to some other people. I think talking to the grad students is a really good place because they've been through the they've been through the application process recently, and they know what's going on and they'll offer a different perspective than faculty.
One quick note. I am a new professor at Purdue. I do not currently have any students, so there's no one to talk to about me, which is probably good in my case. No, but so I will go into a breakout room on my own if anyone has Purdue specific questions. As you've hopefully got a sense of by now, we are a very collaborative group, though. So if you want to ask questions about me and get honest answers, then there are people in this group who've worked with me a lot and know me well. And so feel free to do that in some of the other breakout rooms.
Molly, how do we decide which breakout rooms to go to for the like grad students and stuff? Is there?
I think you are
prearranged. Oh.
I put your names next to rooms.
Oh. Oh, I see it now. Sorry, I missed it.
If you advance the slide also, I think that is something that gives more instruction on breakout rooms.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to stop the recording now.